Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. It's Denise from Dobby Books. The hubby and I spent big bucks and we went for breakfast at Denny's. We like to order from the 55 plus menu. It's very exciting. I hope you all are having a good Valentine's Day. And I will do my book haul video a little bit later today. I may post it later today or I might just post it tomorrow. Right now, what I want to focus on is where I'm at with my medieval studies or my Middle Ages studies. I did finish my book, Cur Deus Homo, from St. Anselm of Canterbury, and I want to just give you a brief sort of review on it. So, who was Anselm? So, he was born around 1033 AD and passed away in 1109. So, that means he lived to be about 76 years old, and that's not bad for 11th and 12th century human beings. He was the Archbishop of Canterbury, so he was in Britain. He was actually he was an Italian, and he was very good at theology and philosophy. He was known for this. He had a very good reputation about this. He's also been nicknamed the father of scholasticism, which in a nutshell is the combination of using faith and reason to come to answers. He is also the originator of what's called the ontological argument for the existence of God. I'll let you look that up, but you get an introduction to it when you read this book. So you start to see how he uses his method in this book to talk about the person of Jesus Christ, and he talks about his divinity and his humanity. I don't want to go any farther, but I want to mention he was a Benedictine. So there's Franciscans, Benedictines. I think they were Franciscans at that point. I may be wrong on that, but he was a Benedictine, different order of priests. It was in 1093 that he was made Archbishop of Canterbury. I wanted to point that out. And because he would be in disagreement with the kings of England, William II was one and Henry I was the other. Each one, in their own turn, exiled Anselm for a time. So he went through that. And he's also known as a doctor of the church. Now, this book is divided into two books. And the first book, let me see. The first book addresses the general disagreement of those who were not Christians. I'm just going to put them in the general category of pagans or non-Christians. They viewed this concept, this teaching that the Christian church had, that God's Son came down to earth and he became the person who died for the Christians. They couldn't understand that concept. It made no sense to them, and their own concept of what a God was, it just didn't fit into their theology. So what Anselm, I keep calling him, yeah, I'm right, Anselm. He addresses that pagan disagreement and the redemption of man via Christ. So that argument that I just told you. He talks about the person and nature of Christ, what it is to sin against God. He talks about dishonoring God, but also how that left a sin stain on the souls of humanity, so to speak. It's stuck with them. And how this sin then could satisfactorily be repaid. And then an interesting little side note, which I brought up in a previous video, is that Anselm taught, and I have no idea if the Catholic Church still teaches this, but he teaches that, and I wrote it down so I get it right, that the number of angels who fell is to be made up from among the human beings. That is something I had never heard of. For anyone not familiar with the angels that fell, there's a teaching in Christian tradition that long before humans came to this earth at all or were even created, that God had his hosts of angels, just oodles and oodles and thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Well, there was a group of them led by Lucifer, who was one of the greater angels, who rebelled against God. And when God threw them out of heaven and created this dwelling that we call hell for them to live in, that Lucifer and those angels who had rebelled with him were sent down to hell. Now Lucifer is known as Satan, and the other angels that went with him are known as demons. And then there's that missing number now up in heaven that apparently we as human beings are supposed to be the replacements for. Interesting concept. I'd never heard of that. Book 2 then delves into the purpose of man's creation, of human being creation. Why were we created? What is our purpose in life, right? And then it finishes off into a deeper discussion into the divine and the human nature of Christ and how this applies to his being qualified to redeem mankind. It's not a very thick book. And I would say, if any of you are inclined to read this, if you have had previous experience with reading any sort of philosophy, you should be just fine reading this. And like any philosophy book, sometimes in the back and forth conversation, because this is set up as a conversation between Anselm and the other person asking them questions. A for Anselm, B for the other person. Sometimes Anselm's explanations do what I've noticed many philosophy books do, is they can sometimes reuse a word or a phrase over and over again in that same sentence. So you have to stop and go, wait. And you have to take it apart so it makes better sense in your head. That is the most difficult of things that I encountered in this, if you want to even consider that difficult. It slowed me down a bit, had me think and process a bit, but it was not difficult reading. And I think what this showed me is where the young Christian church was at the time. Even though the church at the time was about 1,000 years old, you think now that's well over 2,000 years old. So when it was only just halfway to where we are now, it was a good view of where the Catholic Church stood at that time as far as their teaching goes. If you're familiar with Catholicism, then you're able to see what is the same and what is different. And if you're not familiar with Catholicism, I think there are some universal teachings in here that are shared by both Catholics and Protestants that you will still find useful. So, Cur Deus Homo by Anselm of Canterbury. It was a good read, and I would recommend it to all of you. My next read, I don't know what it's going to be. I believe I might be delving into Thomas Aquinas, but that might be a big jump. I don't yet know what my next read will be, but I will be announcing that in a subsequent video later this week. And then at that point, you'll know. Right now, that's the end of it. This is my update on my Middle Ages study. Thanks for hanging out with me, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day, and I will see you in just a few days. Bye-bye.